going, guys? Hope everyone's well. Back streaming Monday morning. Hope everyone had a nice weekend. Just get the stream up on Facebook. So we're going to be going through prepping a track for mixdown today. I find that actually Mondays it takes me a little bit of a little bit of time to get into the flow on a Monday. So I'm experimenting with trying to factor in or scheduling kind of more less creatively intense tasks on a Monday, because I find from Tuesday onwards I feel much more in the zone. So also another aspect to this is that if we go back to my Trello app where I keep track of all my projects, also I want to make sure at all times I'm keeping, this is called the automatic music machine, courtesy of Mike Monday, but at all times I want to keep this whole process ticking along, every part of it essentially. So I constantly want to be coming up with new ideas. This is this section here. I constantly want to be working out what those ideas are going to be. I also want to be developing those ideas till I can say they're finished. I also want to be finishing them, getting them into a finished arrangement, and then I decide which ones I want to release. And this is when we're going on to the mixdown process. So from here to here is mixing and ready to release, and then I constantly need to have these tracks getting released. This is only my music from about 3 or 4 months ago, I think. So I've got a lot of stuff ready to be released, some stuff that's already come out. This one came out on Nervous a while back. So basically I want to be constantly working on every single part of the process, from idea generation to idea development to mixing and to actually releasing music and sending it to people. So this machine needs to be constantly, it's like having a car, you need to make sure that every single part of the engine is well maintained and in a healthy condition to make sure that the car's going to work properly. And it's the same with your music making process as well. So as I said, it's Monday today, obviously, so I'm going to be working on getting some of these tracks that I'm going to release. So in the done column where I finished the arrangement, I want to get them to the point where they're ready to release. Now, as I've said before, I don't want to be doing this process on tracks that aren't good enough to be released. So I'm trying to choose the best ideas out of, this is my current sketchbook of ideas. These are the new ideas that I've come up with in the last couple of weeks. I want to be making sure I choose the best ideas from this sketchbook to be going into the mix down and release column, because I love mixing music. In fact, it's probably my favorite part of the process. And I'd say, if I had to be honest with myself, it's probably at the moment the part of the process that I'm the best at, or it comes most naturally to me, is actually mixing tracks down. And I love doing it. So I can really go in on the mix process. That's what I do. I kind of really, really go hard on the mix process, and it takes a lot of time, and also on the mastering process. So I don't want to be mixing and mastering tracks that aren't going to be good enough to get released, because it's a complete waste of time, because it takes me quite a long time. I like to go in, as I said. So today we're going to be prepping this track here, Back in the High Life, which is a sample-based kind of track. So I thought it'd be interesting to see this is my work in progress, kind of what I call the MIDI project. So it's software instruments, everything chucked down, it's arranged. This is kind of a Spotify edit, so it's only about 2 minutes 40, so I need to do a club version at some point, but I'll do that after I've done the mix. So I thought it'd be interesting to have a look at where actually the project is at in terms of how much mix is on it before I actually go and mix it. Then I'm going to bounce things down, and I've been doing a lot of research on new processes in Logic, because I feel like I've got a little bit behind on all the new features in Logic. So over the last 3 days I've been watching lots of videos on the new Logic and things that I might have missed, because I actually used to be certified. I did all my exams in Logic 9, but although obviously I know all the new features in Logic 10, some of the workflow things I might have missed. So I think I've got some faster ways of working as a result of doing that, which I'm going to share with you. And what I'm also going to do is gain stage this project, which is so important, and it's not the sexiest part of the process, but it's really important for the final result. Okay, so let's just dive in. So this is what I've got. This is my my kind of MIDI project, as I said. So there's some mixing in here. You can see that. Okay, so this kick drum here is being bounced in. So I'm going to take this out now. Some of these things have got analog written in the name. Okay, so these sounds have been bounced through my Golden Age 1073 preamp, my LA2A clone compressor, my LA2A, my Pultec EQ clone as well. So this kick drum has been bounced through some hardware. So anything which is called analog, like this 909's gone through. This main beat sound here, the bass has gone through that channel strip as well. So that's what's happened. So some of these things have got processing on them, but you can see for a lot of these sounds, here's just an intro kick, which has not gone through the analog process, but that's fine. But for a lot of these sounds, there is no mixing on them. There's nothing at all. Okay, and I think that's quite important actually, because let me delete this because this is a 909. In fact, what would be quite interesting as well is, do you want to hear what it sounds like when you run a 909 hat through a hardware chain? So this is, as I said, has gone through a Golden Age 1073 preamp and then a Pultec EQ. So that's without it, and with it. Not exactly the same level, but if I said it's not necessarily night and day difference on that one, but I think it's a little bit more kind of slightly more rich sounding, but yeah, maybe on the hat it wasn't as noticeable. Let's have a look on the bass. So this is again has gone through hardware compression. It's a bit of an unfair comparison because I've got some other plugins on there, but it definitely helps. It definitely adds a lot of richness to things. Now, I love the LA2A on bass. It's kind of my favorite bass compressor, and I've got this Clark Technic one down there, which is really, really nice. Yeah, so okay, so here's this drum loop which has been bounced in, so we can delete that. Okay, cool. So as what the point I'm trying to get across is that really there's not a huge amount of mixing in this project, and that's important because what I'm trying to achieve when I'm writing music is I don't want to have to do too much mixing, because it's a little bit of a, not a distraction, but it's kind of if you're going down like tunnel vision on mixing when you're trying to write music, it can be a bit of a vibe killer. So what I prefer to try and do is choose sounds that work really well together and concentrate on the musical aspect of it, rather than trying to do too much to get those sounds to work together. What you really want is sounds that just work together. So I would suggest, if you're kind of starting out, is work really hard to find sounds that go well together, so you don't have to do a huge amount of mixing. And in fact, that's why I run things through the analog gear, because I often find that once you put things through a nice outboard chain, it doesn't have to be an outboard chain, it could be plugins, as well, you actually have to do less mixing afterwards, especially saturation. If you saturate things nicely, you end up actually having to do less mixing at the end of it, which is cool. Okay, cool. So we've got something here. So basically, first thing I'm going to do is just clean up the project. Okay, so I got stuff here which isn't playing. So I'm going to select them all now in Logic. For you Logic users, if you have track selected, like, you can drag them all and it moves them all down together, which means I can just quickly go through and erase those. So everything now in here is playing in the track. Now, I'm going to save this as a new project alternative. If you don't use project alternatives in Logic, then you should do, because they're really, really useful. Stem prep. Now I'm not going to save that because that means I've still got that to go back to if I need to. But so I'm going to do stem prep, and then we can go through and save a new version and do that as as our kind of mixdown project. Okay, so let's just clean things up here. So we've got a bus which is muted there for the kick drum, so we don't need that. Now this this intro kick, what I'm going to do, I'm going to try and do these kind of in groups. So what I'm trying to do, as I said, when I do mixing, it can actually take me a long time to mix a track. And one of the reasons is that I like to bounce everything out separately, put it in a new project, and then start the mix completely fresh with no plugins on whatsoever, because I like to just really focus on the mix. It takes so long to bounce all the stems. So I've been reading up on quicker workflows in terms of bouncing the stems, and I think I've found some faster workflows. So let's first of all just bounce these in place. So we'll do Control B to bounce in place, and this is going to be my kick. So I'm not going to bypass the effects plugins. I want to bounce them on. I'm going to delete the tracks, the original tracks. I don't need them on there. Everything else is fine. There's no panning. Include volume pan automation. That doesn't matter. So I click OK, and I've got those kicks being bounced down to one track. Now this is separate from the master chain, so I'm not going through the master chain, and that's important because what I'm trying to avoid is having to make a new project, because it's a real massive vibe killer to bounce out all the stems, start a new project, drag them all in. It's great once you get to that point, but I'm trying to find faster ways of working. Otherwise I was considering not doing a separate project to mix the track down, but I'm going to do that. And what's actually interesting is that's quite that is quite interesting. So if you look at the kick here, that kick hadn't been through the analog outboard chain, and this kick has. And I think actually one was an intro kick with maybe less low end, but you can see this is much fatter, and it has more low end because I think I'd cut the low end on the intro. But this has got a much higher peak, which is something I'm going to look at compared to the one that's been through the outboard process. Okay, so I don't know why that's got that extra bit on the end there. I'm just going to chop that off. Don't like that being there. Okay, so we don't need that channel. We don't need this channel. So the next sound we have is this break six. Now this is like another kick layer. Okay, so I've got an EQ that I'm going to get rid of because, as I said, I like to do this in a fresh project, the EQ, and really kind of look at it with a fresh perspective. I'm going to bounce the transient designer on because I've decided that I wanted that. In fact, let me just listen to it with and without the transient designer on. I can't really hear any difference in my headphones, so I'm going to leave that on because I've obviously thought that I needed to do it. The hasn't got any plugins on it. The clap doesn't have any plugins on it. The snare loop has got some stuff going on. What's it got on there? I'll just take that off. So that's got a transient shaper on it. Yeah, I'll leave that on because it's obviously cleaning it up. I've made it mono and I've put on some saturation. Yeah, I like everything I've done to that. Okay, so the 909 hat is just clean, nothing on it. The snare roll has got a phase mistress on it. Okay, so that I might leave to be able to tweak if I need to. So these tracks here are ready to be bounced in place. Okay, so as I said, what I'm trying to avoid is having to go through and bounce all these things out separately, which is what I used to do. But now what I can do, if I come up to bounce, if I do bounce tracks in place, it's going to bounce every single one of these individual sounds back in on its own track. So I didn't know that this option was here. I thought that this would kind of join all these sounds individually into one new audio file, but it won't. It'll put them onto their own tracks, so I can replace the tracks. I don't want to bypass the effects plugins. I want to include the effects plugins on there. Include volume panel automation. Let's leave that on. Click OK, and with a bit of luck, I will now have all of these sounds on their own tracks, but bounced in as audio, because I like to work with audio. And this is all, most of these are audio, some of them are software instruments, but I don't want to be working with lots of individual crappy little things like that. Beautiful. Look at that. Beautiful. Now, another advantage of doing it this way is that I like to do lots of automation on the master with like flangers and filters and stuff like that, which I've done on this track. So I don't have to then recreate the master filtering. Again, that's annoying. Now this one, I'm going to bounce, but I'm going to bypass effects plugins because I want to have this. If I need to tweak that phase, I'm not sure exactly what that phase is doing. So if I need to tweak that, I've still got that there. So we'll delete that track. Clap's got nothing on it. There's nothing playing here. Tambourine loop. What have I got here? It's not really doing a huge amount. I'm going to so these, what's this one got going on? So this has got quite a big tweak to it, this triangle loop, because it's got a LFO tool chopping out like this. So if I take that off, right, I did this on a stream last, I don't know when it was, but I'm using LFO tool a lot to chop out, to clean things up. So it's really cleaning up space. Let me just check that it's not worse. Yeah, I think it sounds better. Now, something which is quite interesting, and I'm going to try doing it now. So this is another new Logic feature. If I can remember exactly how to do it. Yeah, so if I click on Groove Track, okay, that now means that we have these little stars that appear. Now I can choose something which is going to be like the master groove. Okay, so let's try this. If I put the triangle on, now this is going to be locked to the groove of this sample, which is the original track, the original sample. Because I felt like that triangle was a little bit, really a bit out in terms of the groove of it compared to the sample. So let's just solo these and see what differences that's made it in. I think it sounds slightly better, but I just like the feature anyway, so I'm going to leave it on. Okay, so that sample actually sounds really quite average as it stands with on its own. I mean, obviously it doesn't matter what it sounds like on its own, but it does kind of sound a bit strange, I have to say. Okay, so these sounds, crash, finger snap, nothing on it. This break. Now I think if I include pan automation, it should keep that panning as it is. Let's find out. I'm thinking like on this nice timed disco break, it will actually allow me to keep that panning where it is. That's what I'm hoping. So this is obviously a much faster way of prepping the parts than it would be to. No, I don't think it did do what I wanted it to do. Let's see where it's placed this this sound. So maybe the problem is that I need to not have that ticked. Maybe that's what I need to do. Cowbell loop. Okay, well, we'll come back to those. We'll include the clave in there as well. So I'm kind of learning as I go here. So don't include volume pan automation. But basically what I want to do is keep the same pan positions, but be able to change this. I don't want to bounce the pan position in. So I'm guessing that's the problem. Now, why is that coming up like that? Maybe I chose the wrong thing. Bounce, track in place. Oh no, because I don't have the track selected, I think. That would make sense. Tracks in place. I don't include. Hi Rob, how's it going? Hi Lewis, I can see you joined. How's it going, man? Long time. Hope you're well. Laurent, hope you're good as well. Thanks for tuning in again. Yeah, any questions, guys? Just hit me up. Yeah, so there you go. That's done what I wanted it to do. Perfect. So I've got the panning in there. I've bounced all those plugins in that I wanted to, so that's great. Cowbell loop is this cowbell loop. Yep, just got rid of some crap on the end of that. I've made it mono. I make things mono a lot, to be honest. I do use mono a lot. Nothing on that. Main beat analog's been bounced in with the plugin chain, so there's nothing on that. So these tracks can also be bounced in. I think the shortcut, because I'm going to be using this one a lot, is Control Command B. So that's all fine. Normal. I don't want to normalize 100%. Don't want to normalize. It's going to turn the peaks up. That's not what I want to do at all. Now, the sample, I'm going to. What am I going to do with the sample? Sample I'm going to leave. I'm going to leave as it is because it's already audio. In fact, am I going to do that? Okay, so the sample, what I'm going to do is what I want to check actually is, let me just take these off, is probably probably what I could do is just listen through the sample. In fact, I want to take this processing off really, and I want to hear actually what the editing is like. A little fade. That's fine. So I was just checking there wasn't any kind of clicks or anything that jumped out as being wrong. So I'm just going to leave those as they are because they're audio anyway. The bass, I'm going to bounce in, but I'm going to bypass the effects plugins because, in fact, that's kind of silly because that's basically keeping it as it is. So I'm not going to do that because it's already audio. This is the 303 part. So that I am going to bounce in, and I'm going to bypass the effects plugins. So this is the 303 part. I'm going to bypass the effects plugin because I've got a sample delay on here. I just put that on to see what it sounded like, but I probably want to do some processing on that. I toyed with the idea of putting this through the hardware, but I just can't be bothered. So I'm not going to. And also, it's got loads of processing on the Fossion, the 303 plugin as well. Lots of distortion, so I decided I didn't need to. You can see Alan Dixon joined. Hello, mate. How you doing? Thanks for joining. Okay, so there's just a random little bit of guitar that appears once in the track, I think, right at the end. So, yeah, let's see what's going on with that. It's just such a... Yeah, I'm just going to leave it anyway because it's audio, so it doesn't really matter. This is an audio part, which is the effects, like a vinyl effect kind of thing. And then what have we got here? We've got lots of different kind of multi-effect sounds. Don't need anything from there. Okay, so they're all audio, so I can keep them as they are. And there we have the project bounced in. So the first thing I'm going to do is just color things after I've done that. Clap loop, maybe. So I like to keep my my drums green. I'm going to make the kick a different shade of green. Then the sample orange, the bass always goes after the drums. Bass is like a dark blue. That's not... Yeah, that'll do. Sample 303 part can go with the bass. It's kind of bassish kind of sound. Can have a slightly different shade. Muted guitar. Guitars are normally yellow. Don't ask me why. Nothing playing on that track. Now these are all effects. Now I don't know why, but in Logic you used to be able to name one track, and it would, if you called it, like say effects 1, it would name them chronologically. But they're taking away that feature. No one knows how to get that back, or if it's a preference. Please let me know, because I used to use that all the time. Okay, the effects are normally like the color of that vinyl thing. I missed one. Oops. So we'll make this that kind of color. That'll do. Let's put the vinyl all the way to the bottom. Now I've got my stereo out. Is the has got the filter automation on it. So let's give that a region as well. And here's the automation we've got. So what I'll do is I'll copy, convert automation, convert all track automation to region automation. And then if I decide to chop up, move things around, I can move the automation with it. Okay, cool. So now I'm going to save this as a new alternative. Pre-mix down. So I'll say don't save, and now I've got, I've got the original project as it was. Okay, so this is the gain staging aspect of it. So plugins, especially vintage emulation plugins, have a sweet spot. So we want to make sure that at all times we maintain that sweet spot for the plugins. So we want to be able to hit the plugins in an area which they like. So I'm just going to stand up for a second. I'm trying to not sit down for too long, for long periods of time. So the plugins have a sweet spot where you want to hit. So it's like this hardware stuff down here. It has an area that it works best, and it's the same with the plugins, especially the vintage emulation plugins. So if you use any of the Logic vintage EQs or the Waves stuff, SSL API, the Neve stuff, they all are designed to operate to have a sweet spot. Okay, we want to be hitting that sweet spot. So if you're mixing your tracks really, really low in level, you're not going to be hitting that sweet spot particularly. And if you're mixing too high, you're going to have the same problem. If you're mixing too high, you're going to have clipping. You're going to be mixing everything too hot, which means you're going to have no headroom towards the end, which is going to make your life hard. So this is a big deal, the gain staging. If you get this right, you'll set yourself up to have a really good mix down at the end. So that's what we're going to look at. Okay, so as a general rule, right, you can do this with a VU meter. So you can put a VU meter onto your master, and the whole mix should be kind of hitting around the 0 on the VU meter. But I don't like to do it that way. I can just see the window cleaners here. So if you hear any funny noises on the window, that's what it is. Yeah, you can do it by hitting a VU meter, but I'm going to do it a different way. I'm going to do it using peak levels. Now, as a general rule, what you do is you want to have the percussive elements like drum sounds peaking at around -6, and then non-percussive elements like bass, pads, things like that, peaking between -12 and -18, somewhere in that range. And if you do that, then you'll generally have a mix which is going to be hitting all your vintage plugins properly and will give you ample headroom to work. Now, when you're working your DAW, you've got two kind of volumes essentially. You've got the input volume coming into the track, and that relates to the inherent volume of the audio that you've got on the track. So this kick drum, for example, has got its own volume, which is baked into it. And if I have the channel on Unity Gain, then I'm going to be allowing the volume coming in to be the volume going out. If I turn down that channel, I'm going to be turn down the output of that kick drum essentially. But what we want to do is make sure the volume going into the whole channel is correct, because then if I put on an SSL plugin on this channel, then I know that the correct volume is going to be hitting that SSL plugin. Now, what I'm just going to do is, I'm not sure why there's such a volume discrepancy here. So I'm just going to do a quick kind of clip region gain, and I'm actually just going to join these together as one file. So I can address that afterwards if there's a problem with the volume. I don't know why it has to change the color there. It's quite annoying. Anyway, I'll do. So I've got a mix balance that I'm kind of happy with here. So let me just see if I've got any. So I do have some volume automation. So this can make things a little bit more difficult, because when we've got volume automation, obviously if I change the volume, it's going to suddenly jump in terms of the level, but there's a way we can work around that. So let me just see what's got volume automation here. So I think it's just these two tracks here. So let me just color these. Oops. So we know which two it is, because I think I can just do that with a trim, with a gain plugin, basically. So let's play the mix. Let's just take off any bus processing, which is just basically a couple of limiters. So I think the gain staging actually isn't bad on here, but if I come up to here in Logic and I say customize the header, I think it says customize control bar and display. Now what I did there was I just put on something called pre-fader metering, which is when it's switched on, that's off, the meter changes position and it shows you the volume coming into the channel, not the volume going out. So this is telling me that my kick drum is peaking at -13. Now that's a little bit low, because as I said, percussive elements should be peaking at around -6. Now if I've got my mix kind of dialed in at a decent point where I'm kind of happy with the overall balance, what I like to do is select all the audio channels, and then what I can do is just bring up. No, actually, let me just check, because I think I've got some gain dialed in on the region parameters. Might be on here. No. Okay, I don't know why that's doing there. So that's the same problem here. No. I obviously have just turn this down slightly. So let's just do a bounce bypass effects plugins. We'll just do a bounce in place at the base. So I want to be able to globally change the level. So I don't want to do that if there's regions that have got any gain written into the region parameters, because I'm not sure how it will deal with that. So I think I'm good to go now. So there's no more kind of region gain on there. Okay, so let's select everything again. And so I'm trying to maintain the same mix balance. So if I turn up the kick drum in here, so now everything's selected, and we just loop this, I want to get this kick drum hitting about -6. Select the kick drum channel. Make sure everything's selected again. So you can see that the kick's hitting at about -6.6 basically, which is a good level to be coming into the channel. But now the next problem I have is my overall mix. I just take off. This is a bit misleading because I had this this switched on, which means it's going to make the waveforms look bigger. So now we don't have enough headroom on the master. Okay, so let's take it off pre-fader metering for now. And what I'm going to do is actually just arrange my faders. So I'm going to turn down the kick, so actually I have a less of a level on my output. So I've got the correct level coming in, so the plugins will be happy, but I want to take down the level going to my output so I have a bit more headroom. So I normally go for about kind of 6 dB of headroom on here. So often I've heard people say kind of -15 on the kick. But that often actually I find gives me too low a level. So let's try aiming for about -6 on the master. There we go. So now what I've achieved essentially, and one thing I need to check is obviously that there's that snare roll, that the two pink regions have volume automation on them. So that might have thrown that off a little bit. So I might just need to amend the tambourine level. So that goes up way too high, that the modulation here goes up too high. So I wonder if I can just, cause I think it's in the right place, it's just too high. So if I do that, yep, could bring the whole thing down a bit. Okay, so you can see there I've got -6 on the master, so I've got plenty of headroom to do my any mastering processing I need to do. And look at all the individual channels, lots of headroom. hitting around so sorry, on the input level coming into the channels, I'm hitting -6 on the kick. Now, really, ideally, what I should do on this, but this would mess up my my balance that I've already got. And sometimes I do this, sometimes I don't. Sometimes I just take everything down to 0 and start again. But I don't know if it's worth the time to do that on this track, because I think it sounds pretty good already. But let's say like this clap sound, what I have here is, if we go pre-fader, you see it's pretty low. So really what I should do is have, so I could do something like this, is do like a boost. So we're going up to around -6. Then at the bottom of the channel, I can do a cut, and then all the plugins in between will then have the right level going to them. So it depends how far you want to push this, really, because this is not hitting the sweet spot for my output for my vintage plugins, because it's too low in level. But that is. Then anything I put in between, so let's say I put in a Logic vintage EQ in between, for example, this is going to be hitting the right level for this this plugin, and then the output is going to be getting it back to the balance I had before. So it depends on how far you want to go with it, really. But let's have a look on here. Let's just put on a VU meter. I don't want dual mono. VU meter stereo. So we're kind of hovering around 0. We're going a bit higher, going a bit lower, but it's kind of the average, I'd say, is around maybe slightly above 0. But that's looking pretty good in terms of the available headroom on the master, I'd say. And we can see from the peak level that we're pretty good in terms of that as well. So let me just recolor these, and then I'm now ready to go in and start doing some mixing on this. So I'm going to go now because I've got a meeting to attend. Where's my color gone for my kick? We'll do that. But then this afternoon, I will probably jump back in and do start doing a mix. So just to recap, what I've done here is I've prepped the sounds by bouncing them. Remember, in Logic, for Logic users, you can do bounce tracks in place, and you can select multiple tracks and it will bounce them in place on their own tracks again, which has just saved me like afternoons of bouncing parts. And it's maybe slightly frustrated because that feature's been there for a while. I didn't know about it, and I've spent ages bouncing things down, which I didn't need to do. So that's fantastic and was well worth me brushing up on some of the new Logic features. So I've bounced things in place. I've gain staged them so that I've got about -6 dB of headroom on the master without obviously any mastering plugins affecting that. I'm hitting around 0 on the VU meter on the master, which is a good sign. And I've tried to gain stage it so the percussive elements, well, I've only done it for the kick, but you can see how you do it for the clap as well. But I want pre-fader metering on. I can look at the sounds coming in and just make sure that, let's say the kick was hitting at -6, and then I've changed the level of the fader to have my kick drum hitting, well, I think I've got it higher than -15. So turn off pre-fader metering. Where's my mouse gone? Okay, my mouse has lost connection. There we go. So switch that off. So I'm hitting around -9 on the kick drum, going to the output channel, which has obviously got the correct amount of headroom. And that now means that any plugins I place on this channel are going to be happy And what I've done with the claps, say, which still isn't hitting at the right level, I've massively boosted at the top of the channel using a gain plugin. And then I've just, for example, loaded this in, and I've I've cut at the other end to make sure that I maintain the same balance. And that's going to be the case with, say, this break sound. You can see how this is so quiet, but it's only really very low in the mix. So that's going to be way off being the right level. So I do the same there as again. I would go through and massively boost this and then cut it again. So I'm getting a decent level coming in to work with. And what also something I need to work out is, I was going to say, is this mono, but it's not. So that's fine. Okay, cool. So I'm going to leave it there. So that is my prepping the track ready to be mixed in a nutshell. And then I'll probably jump in back this afternoon and just start doing some mixing on this track to get the ball rolling. So guys, thanks for watching, and I'll hopefully see you back later on. Cheers.